Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa. I'm just here to discuss a little bit about this big controversy that I'm sure all of you are familiar about with children and their vaccines. Um, we tend to underestimate the importance of vaccines versus the drastic measures of certain illness. We all do agree that preventing a disease is much better than the outcome of treating it, even after our bodies tend to attack whatever the illness we are going through is. And by the end of this speech, I just hope that all of you tend to understand and have a better understanding as to why vaccinations in children is important, as well as the risks that do come from not vaccinating our children, which many people do tend to argue the fact about or tend to disagree that vaccinations are important as what we are educated on through healthcare. It is very clear that there has been this ongoing controversy regarding children more than adults, whether vaccinating our children is life threatening or is it something left up to choice by our parents. I, for one, am a parent, so I can definitely relate to the importance of vaccinations, as well as I, for one, even when you do have a child who is ill, it's very hard to come across what to do to make them better, even if it's not treated through vaccinations. Although the for Disease Control and Prevention, they do stress the fact that our bodies have something called an immune system, which builds our immunity to viruses such as measles, mumps, rubella, Hib, hepatitis. All of those are all kind of the things that we do get vaccinated, as well as our children do get vaccinated, whether we were aware when we were children or not. As well as from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, health is always the main goal of healthcare, in which our children do get their yearly physicals. Our children do undergo physicals as well as starting of the school year or daycare. They do get screened for certain vaccinations, as well as schools do require them in order for kids to start, as well as there are other options for people who choose not to. And healthcare is there to decide which treatment is the route for best or worst, depending on the child's conditions. I've personally been in the medical field for over 7 years or so. So I would just say one problem that I do seem to run into is whether a parent chooses to vaccinate their children. There are times where a mother may choose to vaccinate as opposed to the father, who may not agree, or vice versa. People tend to have a fear that vaccines may cause health or learning defects such as autism or learning delays, speech impediment, and so on. However, the health risk they're putting their children at, as well as other children surrounding them, even adults, is much worse. I've seen children return with the measles virus in critical condition, which led to them being hospitalized due to the parents declining the vaccine, which you can do certain tests that can go through our blood systems that can see whether or not we've had these certain vaccinations before. I understand that parents always want what is best for their child, as I do have to myself. So I understand the decisions aren't always the easiest to make. However, due to the lack of knowledge and education that is given to parents, I do not believe that they see the severity or the risk they are putting their children at by not vaccinating them. While living in a world full of viruses, even down to the flu virus, you can see how many children tend to get ill, as opposed to those who have had the vaccine who may not contract the flu virus. Not enough people do even pay attention to the controversy, even minutely close enough, because as if you vaccinate your child or you choose not to, it is a personal parental choice. But how safe is that? Is the question that is leading to this controversy. We do truly want to know what is safe, what is too much, what is the risk, without proper consultation from our medical providers, which is very important, in which they do have better views of the issue and do tend to explain it to their patients as well as their parents, so that everyone is aware. What we need to focus on is what makes vaccinations important, what effects they can have on the human body, as what makes parents decide that vaccines are not the best choice for their children. Now, I bet you're wondering what makes vaccines important in the first place. To start, vaccines have a job. And what their job is to make all humans immune to certain viruses. We are all aware that immunity is what keeps us from becoming ill easily, as well as so severe to the point where our lives are in jeopardy each time we tend to get sick. Our immune systems are what protect us from outside germs, from entering our body, attacking our major organs. This is also from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, who do tend to list new illnesses, who tend to update viruses that may come up with new symptoms, new numbers, populations of increasing in viruses in each district or community. Diseases are preventable from vaccines, and they're not only harmful, but can also become deadly, especially in children who are constantly building their immune system, such as infants. I, for one experience, I do have a 1-year-old, and once putting her into daycare, she every week came home with 104 fever. Could not understand why or where it was coming from, but in the end, it wasn't anything deadly. It was more or less the simple fact that she is building her immune system so that when she is older, they are able to have that immune system so they do not get sick just coming into contact with another human that has a cold, for example. I'm sure working parents can definitely understand that children who are in that type of environment, who constantly have the common cold, that it does cause a bit of an issue when you're sending your kid to school and every other day they're coming home sick from another child who just simply has a small cold or just a small little stomach bug. There are over 150 children nationwide who have had their lives taken simply just from the flu virus themselves. And I know within this past year, we can all, I'm sure, just even click on the news and see how many cases of the flu outbreak we really went through within the earlier months of, such as September to January time, when the flu is at its most biggest peak. Vaccines indeed do contain things called antigens, which is, in fact, the slight weaker version of the disease itself. And that is what we do tend to compare vaccines with, is the antigen. However, they definitely are weaker than the actual disease itself, which is the onset of the disease, which in turn will build our body and give our body strengths throughout our lives. So that way, when we do build that immunity from the antigen that we were given at, for example, 2-3 years old, in our adult years, it is an easier fight for our bodies to do as opposed to when we're infants. But more or less, our body is able to just fight that disease and ultimately win. And that's why at times we do have vaccines that may have a first vaccine and may go through a series of 1, 2, or 3. Although vaccines may be scary when you hear the word disease, what actually makes them safe for the body is the real question. Vaccines have come definitely a long way and currently are safer and well equipped more than they have ever been. They do undergo a lot of studies and analyzation by many doctors, scientists, healthcare professionals, and so on, to make sure that they are safe to distribute to children as well as even adults. Because in turn, adults work in healthcare, adults work with bodily fluids, adults work in the real world, and we tend to not register what vaccines we did get as children as opposed to which vaccines we're still missing as adults, and which does not make us immune to every disease out there. Although just like any medication or surgery, there will always be horror stories you hear from outside people that just can't be technically proven through everyone. If somebody says they had a bad reaction to a vaccine, that doesn't necessarily mean the next person would have a similar reaction. Everyone is different in their own way. And that is what lets our healthcare professionals know what person is right for which vaccine and which provisions need to be done in order to get a child or human vaccinated in the right way. Everything we do definitely comes with side effects. However, if the side effects outweighed the positive outcome, vaccines would not be administered in the first place. If they had the main job to make somebody ill, it would be contradicting to inject an illness into somebody and constantly make someone sick, whereas opposed to they can just get sick from another human contact. When we treat our children, we are eliminating the spread of diseases in daycare, schools, the workplace, and even just day-to-day travel, going to the store. Everyone touches the same door handles. Everyone uses the same things such as telephones and so on, in which they can interact with different humans on a day-to-day basis, not knowing what person can come into contact with what. So in all, safety is always the main concern, in which that's the reason, as well as side effects, they do contribute to parents opting out and saying, hey, you know what, vaccines aren't what's best for my child, still neglecting the fact of the actual onset of illnesses that do affect their children, because to be honest, it's a hit or miss if an illness would occur or if the illness may or may not. Parents tend to lean more or less toward not vaccinating their children because, of course, in the 1960s or so, many people experienced these diseases and illnesses without going on through vaccinations. And however, over 400 and plus children were dying yearly due to lack of vaccinations. So therefore, they were not able to fight off these harmful diseases. Parents feel as though there are too many vaccinations. There might be too many series of vaccinations that will take over the child's immune system, causing them to become ill. And as I mentioned earlier, it is not the number of shots a child receives that makes a difference. It's more of what's contained in them, such as the antigens, which is why I do have things such as this. These are every time you do get a vaccine, any healthcare professional will give this to you. These are called VIS forms. This is just a visual information sheet, which will tell you exactly why you're getting the vaccination. They will tell you who should get the MMR, which is children. It will list the ages, such as the first at 12 to 15 months, and then they get the second years later during their 4 to 6 years of age. Some people who should not get it, so it's definitely listed right down here where you can see they do list why people should not get them. For example, people should not get the MMR who have ever had life-threatening allergic reaction to gelatin, people who are moderately or severely ill at the time of the shot, obviously women who are pregnant, and so on. So these specific forms, and I do have quite a few of them on certain vaccines, they do list the risks, they do list severe problems, they do list how you can learn more and where else you can go to find more information. And I do have quite a few. I have this on the MMR vaccine. I have another one on the chickenpox, and these are usually all of what come from the necessary vaccines to enter school or daycare. The rotavirus, and they tell you exactly what the viruses are for, what the vaccines are for, what they do, and what they would prevent. I have a ton of them because I do work in healthcare, so I do get them. We have PCV, we have Hib, and they're all kind of the same. They all list the same information, just on different types of vaccinations. So feel free if you need to see any. But those are usually what is required of school-age children, most at which parents have to supply the immunization record in order for it to become eligible to attend school. If not, they have to sign a waiver form that basically says if your child contracts the disease or becomes ill, either you have to take the certain precautions to do so and remove them from school and handle the illness through different options in healthcare. Parents even feel as though insisting a child to have vaccine is a violation of their rights. That's also along with the controversy of vaccinations in a whole. All around us in different states, just like traffic laws, we tend to have different laws or requirements when it comes to the necessity of vaccines, in which they usually are not enforced until, like I said, a child attends school or daycare where they are intertwined with other children and adults who are definitely at risks. They are needed indeed. Children who have difficult or compromised immune systems. There are children who have certain allergies, like I listed on these sheets. They do tend to say who should not get vaccinated at a certain time in their life, and that can at times very well be due to certain allergies that are contained in the antigen in the vaccines. However, the warning is there, and healthcare professionals do make the appropriate decision as to which child can and can't receive a specific vaccine. That does not go for all of them. That does not mean a child cannot have any vaccines due to allergies, but there are certain allergies that do interfere with specific vaccines. That's just a tad bit more difficult to vaccinate them. However, by vaccinating others around them does help lower the risk of contracting the further vaccines. So if somebody isn't able to get vaccinations for whatever reason, as long as majority of us are vaccinated, it does lower the risk of them contracting any specific disease, and that's usually more or less for the school-age children. States do adhere to religious beliefs and personal exemptions, of course, knowing the risks that they come with each. There are plenty of information pamphlets and such that do explain you very well have your personal exemption and your religious beliefs are respected. However, there are a ton of risks that come with doing so and making the decision not to vaccinate. Although it's not a forced issue, vaccines are important in the health and well-being of our children. Vaccines are a difficult topic, I understand, to discuss because so many people understand and hear so many stories. In fact, there are so many directions this can go, and safety and protection may not be the prime discussion. Outside of the simple risk of non-vaccinated children, there is also the respect of exemptions, still considering our human rights, of course. Vaccines are made to protect our children as well as just everyone as human beings, to save anyone from contracting life-threatening diseases and to help overcome even a minor illness from spreading and becoming much worse to them or those around them. Although there's the strong controversy with vaccinations in a whole, our children are the next generation, and if we allow them to remain unhealthy or spread diseases, then what will we have unless we treat our children with proper medical treatment? While still compromising enough to those who have the fear of risks, we need to come together and definitely figure out solutions to the matter and make our children healthy and diseaseless and less of a concern. Although I do understand many people have their own beliefs and their own theories and their own, of course, the internet plays a huge role in it. However, working in healthcare, I can definitely tell you I've seen less children vaccinated have issues as opposed to those who have not had vaccinations do come in with definite problems, therefore, in their future, such as someone contracted a disease. It could have very well been treated. However, lifetime, they might have to be on certain medications for their lives. They might have certain delays in learning just simply from not being vaccinated as a child. This is all stuff that constantly is going to be controversial until there is a better way of getting certain children vaccinated and certain children back to health the way they should be. It's a very difficult thing to discuss. However, I feel the more discussions that go on, the better and further learning this can very well be. And in turn, hopes that we can definitely figure out how to get the health of our children on track to the point where we can come to an agreement that this is something that is definitely needed within our children, as well as adults staying on top of their health and coming to terms and updating those immunizations. Thanks and have a great day.